Hey guys, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my channel. So today we are starting the start to finish journal series, working with Crafty Lisa's vintage yummy kitchen ephemera from her upcoming sale. I did get an update from Lisa saying that her sale was being rescheduled to April 22nd through the 24th. So if you'd like to snag any of the ephemera that I'll be using in this journal, please just head over to her profile, which is linked below in the description box of the video, and request a tag for that sale. So I was just cleaning up my desk a little bit. I don't know why I started recording before stacking my fabric very neatly, but it is what it is. I, as you guys know, have a pretty small desk. So just keeping everything on it and kind of tidy at the same time is challenging, but I do the best I can. So I am just trimming my file folder. I always use kind of a manila file folder as the base for my journal because it's already folded in half evenly and I can trim it down to be any size base that I need. And it just adds some stability to like a textile fabric covered journal without making it very thick like a hardcover. So I'm just trimming it down to be a standard size journal cover. And I think I did put the measurements right there on the screen. If you're using inches, it's 4.33 inches, and I just kind of use the 4 5/8 mark. I know that's a little bit more than 0.33, which would be a third of an inch, but it works and it fits inside a standard TN cover. So that's the mark that I use on the ruler. And now I'm just grabbing my fabric that I had planned to use for the base fabric. This is a vintage sheet piece that I snagged from April and Jules Vintage, and I'll link their shop below in the description box as well. She had this really great bundle of vintage sheet pieces, and if you guys know me, you know that I love to use vintage fabrics to craft my journal covers as much as possible. So when possible, I do use vintage, and this is one of those pieces that I have just been kind of hanging on for the right project. But the orange and yellow flowers were just perfect, I think, for this cover. And so I'm just using up a bit of that. And I'll still have some extra to embellish the journal later. So yeah, I do just hand tear my fabrics for the most part. I rarely ever measure. And that's just my preference. I find measuring just kind of stresses me out a little bit. So aside from cutting my journal cover to the correct size, I never measure anything. So yeah, I just kind of snip a little bit into the fabric and then hand tear the rest. And I will just secure this around the manila file folder base with a few paper clips. I find that paper clips work well for doing this base piece of fabric, just like they hold it in place without poking holes in it, and they're a little bit easier to manage with the file folder than like straight pins would be. And so I'm just kind of pulling it snug but not too tight. Like I don't want it to create any bulges or bubbles or buckling in the file folder, and so I'm pulling it to where it's snug up against the edge but just not too tight. So now after that step is done, I'm just making sure I like how the florals landed on the cover, and then I will trim off kind of the corner the way I was showing you guys with my fingers just now. I'll trim off the corners to kind of reduce the bulk a little bit, and I leave maybe like a 1/4 inch. Like, again, I'm not measuring, it's not exact. I just trim out some of the bulk on the corners, and I cut the fabric to where it is like a mitered cornered edge. And I'll show you guys how I stitch that down in a second. Okay, so now I'm just going to take it to my sewing machine and just show you guys how I kind of stitch things down. So I start maybe 1/8 to 1/4 inch inside the cover of the journal. Sorry, I have to move my tea out of the way. Small desk problems. So I'll start stitching maybe 1/4 to or 1/8 to 1/4 inch inside the journal edge, the journal cover edge, just so that I'm catching the fabric layers and the file folder. And then I'm showing you guys how I fold that corner in. So I'll fold the side that is on the sewing machine needle currently under the piece that's coming up. And then I'll just fold the little middle piece in. It can get a little bit fiddly depending on the type of fabric you're using. I find that cottons and like this sheet material work really well, and they're fairly easy to fold and keep straight while you're stitching. So I'm just going to continue around the rest of the journal cover, and yeah, so I've sped it up quite a bit because it's just the same thing over and over and over again. Then at the end, I do just backstitch just the tiniest bit to hold everything in place. Most likely I will be stitching over this again as I'm adding my like kind of cover embellishment fabrics and trims. And I just wanted to show you guys like how the edge looks after adding all the stitching around the edge. So now I'm just going to go through my actual real process of like picking fabrics and show you guys, like, it does take me quite a while to pick fabrics and just decide on layout. I really didn't have a plan going into this journal cover aside from like just picking out the different textures and colors that I possibly wanted on the cover. I did know that like the papers that I have and the ephemera pieces are very much like green and yellow and kind of natural, like neutral tones. And I chose from my own digitals to add in a lot of blue. And so I'm just going with that color scheme and just kind of picking out some different textiles to layer up. I do know that I want to use like a significant piece of this like kind of yellowy mustard colored lace, which was actually like upcycled from a shirt that I found thrifting, but I loved the lace pattern, and so I decided to buy the shirt and just kind of take it apart and like kind of harvest the lace, if you will. And then this is just some like cotton lace that I found also thrifting. I think it's from maybe a tablecloth, which I think is very appropriate for kind of a kitchen themed journal. So I'm just tearing off some of the cotton, and you guys can see I'm kind of like deciding where things will lay on the cover. And this fabric I actually got from Sarah Crafty Paper Bits last year, I think. But I've been waiting on kind of the right theme journal to use it. Like, I love the cherries and berries on it, and I just think it goes perfectly with this theme, even though it's not exactly the right colors, I guess. Like, the subject matter offsets that, I think. And then this little mirrored trim is from Boho Tree. Again, I'll link her shop in the description box. I usually, when I purchase trims from Sheikah, I usually buy like her remnants pack, because you get a significant piece of each different kind, but she sends you like a really good sampling of different trims and different patterns. And then this is just some vintage trim that I had, I think I got it from, now I have to think. I got it from Heirloom Pages. Sue sent it to me last year too, I think. I keep things for a while. I've been using it, but just not all, like I'll have some left in my stash. But yeah, nothing is wasted, and I do use every little bit of my trims and fabrics. Like this blue striped material is just that little piece that you see. I don't have any more of it, and that was the very last of it. So it's going on this journal cover, and that will be it. Unless I have some hiding somewhere else in my stash, which I don't think I do, because I loved it so much. So now I normally I'll take things off in the order that they go in, from like bottom to, or top to bottom, so that when I'm stitching things down, I can just add them back and not forget where I placed them in the first place. But actually this journal cover is fairly simple. I mean, it looks complicated when you look at the finished product, but it really only has 5 major pieces, I think, maybe 6. But they're so large and they're so layered that it just really adds to kind of the complexity of the visual finished product. So yeah, most of the time as I'm stitching things onto the covers, I don't really worry too much about back stitching for the most part, because I do glue the inside cover, and so I find that back stitching is kind of like unnecessary. So while I was stitching down my initial layers, I decided that I wanted to add an additional layer of lace, and so I'm just playing with whether I want to use that white lace that you saw or this blue lace, and I do decide to use the blue. So I'm just snipping off a piece, and I will add it in between the 2 fabric layers and the trim pieces, but before the other 2 layers of lace, if that makes sense. So you'll be able to see my process on how I attach everything. I'm not going to stitch around the blue lace, because I don't want the kind of cream off-white colored thread to show on the edges of my pretty blue lace. And for the most part, it's going to be secured anyway with the yellow lace being stitched over top. And so I'm just going to run a simple stitch straight down the middle of this blue lace. And then I'll go ahead and attach the trims over the top of that. So I'm just checking layout as I go, making sure everything kind of lines up properly. And yeah, that just like makes sure, or it helps me make sure that my journal cover is turning out the way I expected it to. In the past, I would just kind of stitch as I go, and things wouldn't always turn out the way I had originally laid them out or originally planned. Like if I had gone and checked and like double checked as I was adding things to the cover that the layout was still correct, then the cover would have turned out more like my original plan, I guess. So yeah, I am just stitching around, and on this orange trim, I did not stitch the furthest edge, like the outside edge, because I will be stitching over that edge again once I add the inside lining to the journal. So now I'm just going to add on my yellow lace and this white piece. I do trim down the back edge of the yellow lace to match up with the white, just because I did not like how that looked, like just kind of how it overlapped. So it's always okay to trim pieces after you've already started adding to the journal cover. It's always okay to reevaluate and trim and adjust as you go. Like, I decided to add a little piece of this cherry fabric to the back, and I'm just layering on, like, it had some threads hanging, and so I'm just manipulating that to be stitched down as well. And I'll show you guys kind of a close-up picture of like how the cover looks close up at the end of the video, so you can see that. And so now I'm going to stitch on like my bigger lace pieces over where the spine will be. And really that will be it. I am going to talk a little bit about how I stitched down this white lace piece. Like, the yellow lace is very lightweight, and so I can stitch around the outside edge and it doesn't create like very much tension on the two sides of the journal cover. But because this white lace is very thick, I am just going to add in a few tacking stitches and not really stitch all the way around it, because I want it to lay flat, but I don't want it to create like too much buckling or tension in the front and back cover of my journal. And so now, kind of off camera, I'm sorry I didn't show this, I am just stitching around the kind of scalloped edge of the yellow lace to where it is stitched down completely to the cover. And now I'll just stitch the back side. And I am kind of pulling it a little bit tight because I want it to be like totally flush with the journal cover. And so now on this piece, I will be stitching down the solid side of the lace all the way to the back, or all the way to the end rather. And then on the front side, what would be the front side of my journal, I'll just add a few tacking stitches onto like the points of the lace. So again, I'm so sorry I didn't show this process. I forgot my camera was not angled directly at my sewing machine. But again, I will be showing you guys kind of like a last final photo showing the actual final product of the journal. Now that all the stitching is done, I am just checking the final layout and like checking my fabrics and making sure there's no additional details or pieces that I want to add before I move on to adding some embellishments like buttons. So yeah, I'm just checking everything and kind of trimming the threads that are hanging off a little bit, and yeah, that's pretty much it for the fabric portion of this journal. So now for the last step, I am just going to add a few little button details, and so I'm just grabbing some of my vintage buttons, and I keep them in kind of this like container with all these drawers, and it's on the same shelf that my camera is mounted to, so I'm sorry for the shaking of the camera a little bit. But I knew I wanted to use some of my mother of pearl buttons, and so I grabbed that drawer. And I also used this like kind of metal shank button. And so I'm just kind of deciding on how I want the layout to be, and then I'll actually just stitch them down. I do not decide to use any of these red buttons that I'm pulling out. I wasn't sure if I wanted to, but I decided to just go with the 1 metal and the 4 mother of pearl buttons. I do just use some perle cotton thread in white and just a regular like embroidery needle, I think, whatever was handy, as long as it fits through the eye of the needle or the buttonhole. I think as long as the needle works, it's fine. I'm not a needle snob, obviously. Okay, so a tip that I have for you guys here, if you are stitching your buttons and you have like a specific layout that you really like for your buttons, go ahead and pre-poke the holes. So if you start with your needle on the inside of the journal cover, since it's paper, if you pre-poke your holes, you will be able to see where your needle is supposed to go in, and your buttons will line up exactly right. So that's my tip. I think maybe the biggest tip for for the video. But yeah, I was just struggling right then with threading my needle, and I actually stopped the video to find a different needle because I was struggling so much. So yeah, I am pre-poking my holes right now, and this will be the very last step for this video. I'm actually going to add lining the journal, or like doing the inside of the cover, to the next video when I start my page prep. Like, I kind of count that as part of my page prep because I plan my first page and my inside cover at the same time. So I'm going to cut off for now, let you guys finish watching the video, and hopefully you have enjoyed it. You've enjoyed watching my process and have found it inspirational in some way. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. Till next time, take care and happy crafting.